Cool. Well, we're live. Well, welcome to the Sober Strength Show. I'm here with Dr. Michael McCormick. How you doing, Dr. McCormick?
I'm doing well, Jesse. Thank you for having me on this morning.
It is a pleasure to be here with you on this Friday. I told Dr. McCormick, he introduced himself to me as Michael, and I told him that with my 10-year experience working with physicians, I will not call him anything but Dr. McCormick
Very
because he's
kind of
earned it.
you.
So,
Yeah, and that's
yeah.
A-okay. Either way.
Yeah. Cool. Well, look, we're gonna jump right into it. Of course I want to get your story and your background, but there's two topics that I'm hoping we can spend some time on today. One of them we talked a little bit about offline, which is medication assisted treatment, and that could be for both alcohol or opioid use or anything really, because that's really an emerging topic that people want to know about. And then the other one is just your background as a physician who has had mental health and substance use challenges. That's
Correct.
something I really want to talk about, because I think so often we look to our physicians and clinicians to be almost these superheroes that are helping people, but sometimes they're the ones that need the help. So I'd love to kind of jump into that as well. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Cool. Let's do it. So, I've read about your impressive background, your surgical career, and now your work with release recovery. But can you just share a little bit more with me and with the audience about your background and how it is that you find yourself doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is a little bit of an interesting path to get here today, a circuitous route, but a good one. And I think that there's certainly a hand in this, and there's something at play that led me here. So I really, probably wanted to be a physician from an early age, like, maybe even high school. Certainly in the college, then when I was in college, I kind of had that motivation and, hey, I got to get into medical school, and actually started out wanting to be a family physician. And wanted to take care of families from, young to old. And, but then while in medical school, got the surgery bug after doing some general surgery rotations, and made the decision then as I progressed through med school to, apply to general surgery programs, and ended up, getting into a good one there at Lankenau Hospital, which is outside of Philadelphia, and became a general surgeon. Meanwhile, the parallel process that was going on in my life, though, was my alcoholism. Was huge. So from the first time I drank, pretty typical maybe for a lot of kids, was freshman or sophomore year in high school. And I think that what happened, or what I experienced, was that when I drank, I seemed to drink a little differently maybe than others, and the effect that it had on me was different. However, in the back of my mind, I had that motivation and that push and that drive to kind of keep achieving, keep doing everything I can. It was always taught from an early age that no matter what you want, you just work hard and you'll get it. And so kind of moved through high school, A-okay, grades were fine, sports great, socially, everything pretty good. Not a ton of huge consequences, certainly around the drinking. And then as I progressed into college, it was different, right? So I had a lot of, lucky enough to have a lot of great friends, and my drinking was more in college of a binge fashion, I would say. So, a lot of studying, was a chemistry major pre-med. So I was studying a fair amount, and, was lucky enough to walk on and play basketball at St. Joe's, for a year, and just had a lot of different things going on, but the alcohol was always under the surface. And that's probably when, around those ages, so now I'm 20, 21, 22, that's when I started to know some consequences in the fact of, like, behaviors just being off, a lot of blackout drinking. And so the first time I went to AA was actually at the age of 21. And I knew that I was, an alcoholic deep down, and I was like, hey, I got to figure this thing out. It is in my family, like so many of us, right? It's up the family tree. And so I remember going to, my first couple of AA meetings, just trying to figure this whole thing out, and would get there right at the start of the meeting and would leave as soon as it was done, like that whole, I don't want to be seen here. Meanwhile, the people that are there are all alcoholics. You know what I mean? There's not people there from the local newspaper taking notes.
No,
And
and you're still in college at this point at 21?
I am, yeah, I'm still in
Okay.
college. So, tried there and the pain. And, I go through periods of not drinking. I'd be able to abstain and go through that, but I didn't have the solution, that so many of us that get in the 12-step recovery figure out, that God bless us with. So, there'd be times of pain though, not drinking, right? Because the drinking was my solution. Meanwhile, there's this whole next thing. And what I mean by that is like that progression of, hey, okay, now we got into med school. So we're graduating college. Now we're into med school. And, okay, next thing is, like I have to get the good rotations, and that's the next motivation. Obviously I have to pass tests, and I have to pass this national certifying exam, then I have to pass this one, and now I got to get into a residency. So it's always like the next thing. But, in the background, the alcohol, was always there. And substances were a part of my story as well. They came in at different times and in different fashions. Certainly cannabis was an issue. And then later on, the opiates came in when I was trying to stop drinking. So, look, I kept progressing through. I ended up getting, a good residency that I was happy with. And would the drinking slow down, and the use slow down at times? Yeah, absolutely. Because, I wasn't a totally, out of my mind, and I still was productive in so many parts of my life, but, I was still, it still was an issue though,
When you say, sorry to interrupt, when you say issue for you, were you using alcohol more for the social aspect at the time, or were you using it to cope with stress? Because those next things, as you put it, studying, trying to get into medical school, checking that box, trying to get all these different things. How would you describe your use? Were you thinking about it intentionally, or were you just kind of using it, free will?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, right? So when I work with patients now, we talk a lot about, hey, what are the reasons that you use X, Y, or Z? And for me, I like the way alcohol made me feel. I mean, that's it from the very beginning. I felt more a part of. I felt more included. I felt more, I enjoyed the euphoria. But I think that your question's a really good one. You've got good insight into it. As we progressed, it became a stress buster and anxiety, and maybe that was even under the surface, and I didn't even know that that's what was going on there.
Yeah.
Because I think that burnout became a part of my story towards the end of my surgical career. It certainly did, 100%. So I think you're right. That was an issue and a part of it.
Yeah. I talk about 2 seasons of drinking in my life, and this isn't something that was conscious at the time. It's all in hindsight. But for me, the first season was euphoria. You said that. That was it. That was the word. It enhanced these experiences. Think like, pre-gaming in a parking lot for a concert with beer pong. I mean, that alcohol was like, creating that euphoric experience. But then later in life, before I burned out as well on the corporate side, not the clinical side, but as you know, clinical can also be corporate. It was intentionally using alcohol to self-medicate from stress and burnout. So that's the context for me to ask the question. Hey, it's Jesse. And if you've been following this show, then I've had my fair share of struggles with alcohol over the years. You also know that I built a pretty solid toolkit to help maintain a healthy relationship with alcohol. Things like fitness, mindfulness, accountability groups, and technology. All great, all helpful. But there's one tool I've recently found that blew my mind, and I can't believe it took me so long to discover it. It's called naltrexone, an FDA-approved, science-backed, and affordable medication that helps reduce cravings and control drinking. The first time I took it, I'll never forget, I was skeptical and not completely buying into the idea that a medication can help me with drinking. But just after a few days, I could not believe how effective it was in eliminating all of my cravings for alcohol. It needs to be better known. And that is where Or Health comes in. And I'm honored to have them as a sponsor of the show. You can have doctor-prescribed naltrexone shipped discreetly and directly to your door. No pharmacies, no doctor's offices, just the help you need. It's online, it's private, and it's judgment-free. And most importantly, it works. As of today, over 35,000 Or members have been treated, and 76% of respondents report drinking less in just 2 short weeks. So here's how to get started. Text STRENGTH to 710-710. That's STRENGTH to 710-710. You'll take a quick, discreet survey, and they'll guide you through the entire process of trying naltrexone for the first time. It's easy, straightforward, and honestly, might be the best move you make for yourself today. So, if you're ready to take a massive step forward in controlling your alcohol intake, text STRENGTH to 710-710 and let Or Health help you redefine your relationship with alcohol.
I think it's it. So we have a very similar story there, and that's what we see with a lot of people, and so when I went through a period, I talked that like, the first time I was called an alcoholic was probably like 2021, something like that, and I was like proud of that, like a badge of courage. And what I mean by that is like, look, I'm succeeding, academically and doing fine in college. I'm getting into medical school. I'm you know doing fine on a lot of different fronts. So it's like, yeah, look at this. That's the whole functional alcoholic thing,
Yeah.
which we think. And then as my 20s go on, and then in my late 20s and into my early 30s, I know I'm an alcoholic, and I'm like, this is pure hell. I mean, then it like, was like, I was like completely bummed that I was, and knew in my mind that I was, and I didn't know the solution or how to get out of it. And then once I figure that out and do move through it, then it goes back again to being proud, being alcoholic, because it's changed my whole life, changed how I am as a dad, changed how I am as a husband, as a brother, as a son, all those things, let alone as a physician. That's like the least on the list. But just I'm a better person because of my recovery and what I've learned, and kind of what I've grown through. So, and I'll try to be quick with you. So the story, so I'm in residency, I'm in general surgery, I'm in Philadelphia. I've been, born and raised there. And, I've got a lot of friends from a lot of different levels, right? From going to Eagles games, from high school buddies, from college buddies, from, a lot of crazy nights back and forth from the shore. And so we're getting towards the end of my surgical residency. And my wife, God bless her, she, we had 2 kids at the time, and she was like, hey, let's look in the South for jobs. And I was kind of like, look, I haven't left, like the furthest I've been from home is like 2 hours to the Jersey Shore. I'm like in like a little cocoon here. And so we looked at places in the South, Florida. We looked at North Carolina, like resort towns, South Carolina, St. Simon Island, like really like kind of nice, beautiful places. But this job in Alabama kept coming up. And it was crazy. I went down there and visited and loved it. And so we took a job in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and Florence, Alabama, in the Shoals area there. And so I finished residency. I was not in a good headspace. The alcoholism was raging at times, and I'm still working like 110 hours a week. So you gotta really work hard to drink. And now the opiates have come in, and the amphetamines. So the amphetamines on the back end with like, how am I going to get up and function at 5:36, and how am I going to operate at 7:30 and 8? And then the opiates with the thing of like, hey, people, you can't smell like booze, right, when you're working, and this, that, and the other, but it's going to give you a mind change. So it was raging, and so we moved down south, my wife and I, and take a great job, and I actually got better for a little bit. So my wife doesn't have this disease that I do, so she doesn't. She was just trying to keep me alive, which I learned later once I got sober. But it was the geographical change. And so, those that have been afflicted with alcoholism or substance use, they know that that's not going to work. So it did for a little while, for a couple of years down there. During that time, I'm still drinking, but I'm working really hard, and we're building up this practice, and everything's good. And, but then it got back to where it was before. And it just got back to, if not worse, because now, which you would describe, which is a really good point, like there's success. So a lot of times we drink because we're sad, because we're down, or because things are good. And that's really what it was for me. It was kind of like it wasn't a work hard, play hard, because I was certainly working hard. It was more of an I deserve this. And that's what was in my head. Like, I'm working so hard. We got a couple of houses. I got now 4 or 5 kids. We've got all 5 kids. We've got this great life. I built this big practice. We're from the north down in the south, and we've been accepted, and it was that.
So what? So what if I want to like treat myself or disconnect? So what if I want to imbibe because I've earned this? That's a dangerous mentality.
It really is, and I think that's probably the biggest thing that it was, and look, during these periods of time, so this is probably like years 3 through like 5 being down there, I'm having those consequences. I'm having episodes where I shouldn't. I'm drinking too much. I'm doing stupid stuff. But like it's causing problems in my marriage, and it's in family, and like, I've gone through periods where, it's so funny, like not funny, but it's like, where I remember being younger and my parents being like, hey, this is a big night tonight. This is a big wedding. Everyone's going to be there. That's code for like, hey, don't drink too much and act like a fool. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's what I was hearing.
Yeah.
And so during this time down there, that's what's going on, right? So I'm having more consequences. I'm going to my wife. She knows that I'm totally an alcoholic and out of my mind. And I'm saying like, I'm going to stop drinking.
5
And
kids at this time?
yeah, we've probably got 5. Well, my little guys, my twins were like 1 when I got sober.
Twins. Bless you.
Yeah. Thank
Wow.
God they came at the end, right? Where we would have just had 2. But so I am. But still, like I said, working. We've built this big practice. We're well respected. I'm chief of surgery when I end up getting sober, which is crazy. I'm like 30 some years old, youngest ever, and so there's like a lot of good things too. But in the background, the alcohol and then and the substances are still a problem, and the mental health that goes with it, right? So as you described, the depression and anxiety, that they just run alongside it. They just do.
Yeah.
And it's like you have a feeling, or excuse me, I have a feeling. I had a feeling of like, I'm accomplishing all this. I feel like I'm at the top of the mountain, but I'm not happy. And so I'm like saying to myself, what is that, or what's going on there? So, I guess then the dance begins, as many of us have, and I see, October it's actually Halloween. We're coming up on it. Holy smokes. October of 09 to 2009. I was going through this pattern of, give or take 2 or 3 months of drinking. My wife gets after me. Then I go 2 or 3 months of not doing anything and being insane. And then I'm slipping into the opiates for a month or 2, 3 months. And then my wife figures out that a lot of times, I've been writing these opiates and using her, her name for the script. So long story short, she figures out that I'm using the opiates. She's going to go to the state board, which is so right of her to do. But we do this whole dance. And finally, Halloween of 09, I come home one day from work and I'm like, oh my God, I'm in big trouble now, because it was something that I did. She had found either the alcohol or the pill bottles, whatever it may be. And so I said, hey, I'm going to stop drinking. So I actually did go to someone at my hospital. I dove somewhat put my toe into the AA world and started going to a meeting a week and stopped drinking and stopped using substances. And that went from October until the following spring of 2010. And then we were away on vacation, and I had this terrible kind of relapse and got back into the opiates and the alcohol. Not as much of the alcohol because everyone was watching me, but it's very true that it goes right back to where it was, which it did. Right back, out of my mind. So this is like April, May of 2010. Kind of the gig was up. Like people knew, meaning my wife knew, the CEO of my hospital, who I was pretty close to, knew, the guy that I had gone to, the chief of medicine that was trying to help me, who was in recovery himself. And it just kind of was like my office staff. Everyone kind of knew like, oh man, he's back at it again. And so I ended up in treatment. And, I went to treatment at Bradford outside of Birmingham, Alabama, Warrior, Alabama, and was there for, I went, the funny story is I went there for like an evaluation, 3-day evaluation or 4-day, which is like, it's just a way to get us in the door because we're, kind of crazy as physicians. And I thought I would be out of there on Thursday. And, 90 days later I leave, which is like exactly what I needed. But it saved my life, and it was very powerful, the inpatient experience for me. Definitely.
Yeah. Chief of surgery, father of 5, husband, well respected. What did it feel like, let's just say, when you realized you quote had to go to a 90-day treatment? What were some of the emotions going through your mind when the gig was up?
Oh, you perfect. That's the right question, right? So the shame and guilt was like so intense, like beyond, not that I'm anything special, and I thank you for those kind words, but in my mind, I was special. And it was like, how am I going to do this? So the shame and the guilt, I remember the thought process of my mind, and part of my story as we get through is taking care of healthcare professionals for my career here. And it's like, I should have known different. That's the quote that comes up so much. And I should have known better. I should have controlled this. I should have figured this thing out earlier. My life is over. My career is over. That definitely, not my life is over, but my career is definitely over. Definitely popped into my head. 100%. Definitely.
Veterans, you served us, now let us serve you. I'm Jesse Carrajat, founder of Ultim Fitness and a proud U.S. Marine, and I couldn't be more honored to give back to you our Ultim Fitness app. Absolutely free for veterans. That's right. With over 24 expertly designed fitness programs, Ultim Fitness rivals any top fitness app you can find on the market. Whether you're looking to build muscle, shed body fat, boost strength, or even run a half marathon, we've got you covered. Every workout comes with tutorials, video demonstrations, performance trackers, timers, and everything you could need so you're fully equipped to meet any fitness goal. Plus, veterans gain free access to our exclusive fitness community where you can connect, ask questions, and dive deeper into the world of fitness with others who've served. You can also access our emotional fitness courses for things like alcohol reduction, social media cleanses, and much more. There's no catch, no hidden fees, just a simple thank you from us to you. Visit ultimfitness.com, verify your military status, and we'll send you your free access right away. And if you're not a veteran, we want to support you too. Full access to everything I just mentioned is just $9.99 per month. So visit ultimfitness.com, that's ALTUMFITNESS.com, and build your fittest, strongest life yet. Live deep. Yeah. All right, Dr. McCormick, I leading up to this, as I always do, I did some research and I listened to some of your other interviews you've given, and I heard you say something that I just wanted to double click on. In telling your story on another show, you said, quote, "I had periods of being dry, but I wasn't sober." Can you unpack the difference between those two terms, dry and sober?
What I meant by being sober is being sober and in recovery. So what you just, it's a wonderful question that you have. So being dry was that I just was abstaining from alcohol or substances. And the problem with that is that the alcohol and the substances were my solution at the time. And so what do I mean by that solution? Well, that they were what, like, my medicine that I was using, inappropriately, of course, but that's what I was using in order to function and get through the day and be in a good place emotionally, mentally, all of that. So by being dry, I didn't have that solution, and I didn't have that help from a mental health standpoint. So angry, anxiety, mood swings, being short with people, not at my best, that was being dry. We talk about it a lot that people can, put down the drug or the drink, but if they're not working a recovery program, I hate to say it, and I never encourage anyone to continue drinking or using drugs, but they're in a worse spot. And so when I was sober, and when I got sober for real and got into recovery, it just changed my whole life. I just had a totally different outlook on life, was able to relate to people, to be a true human, to be a good human, to be a good dad, be a good father, as we had described before. And just my mood, my outlook, the way I carried myself in the world totally changed. So yeah, it's a huge difference.
I love that. It's almost as though what you're saying is if you're dry, you're not fully free from those chains. They're just not actively, you're not actively consuming, but when you're sober, you have full freedom from those overindulgences and the consequences.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we talk about, like, when we get into the neurobiology of addiction and the midbrain and the frontal cortex and all that stuff, like when the midbrain is the one talking and like saying, no matter what, you have to get this alcohol or these substances or whatever, you're going to do like things that and you're not going to be in your right mind. And that's kind of where I was with that, like just not making great decisions.
I know you spent some of your years early on in addiction medicine focused specifically on clinicians and nurses, doctors. Is that right?
Yes, exactly.
What'd you learn, and what specific to that community makes them vulnerable to substance use challenges?
Yeah, it's that. It's so I love taking care of that patient population. It's the hardest one to take care of, the hardest to treat, without a
Mm,
doubt. And so from a statistical standpoint, healthcare professionals definitely have a higher episode of alcoholism and substance use.
mm,
And so when we talk about that, is it the, genetic component is obviously a big part of it, but then with the healthcare professionals, there's definitely an environmental part. And so the environmental you can break down into kind of two different things. One is the exposure or the availability or the being around it. And then the other is what you just described, which is a high stress situation
mm,
and the stress and anxiety that comes with that. Similar to, when you take care of, other first responders and policemen and firemen, it's a tough patient, but with the healthcare professionals, there was definitely that. And boy, did we see it with COVID. I
mm.
mean, it was like we were like running an ongoing study with COVID. We weren't, but it was like unbelievable to see. So there was early traumatic response to COVID. So there was like a huge upswing in that, people that had trauma histories, and it was brought to the forefront because of this and because of the fear and not seeing family and, you know, like how life totally changed. Then there was another element of COVID, which was like husbands and wives weren't like families were seeing their husbands and wives more because they were home and they're like, oh my God, my husband's or my wife is, drinking like way too much. They're a total lunatic. Like, what's going on here? So we saw that. And then after COVID started to settle down, maybe like late 20 into 21, then we saw another trauma response and another kind of bump in that. So it was just really, and I know there's been a lot of papers recently about that, but just to see it firsthand was amazing. But it's definitely that the environmental part was big with, which is the stress and then the availability. Anesthesiologists are a higher percentage of, you know, substance use based on the availability of opiates being right
Mm.
there all day, every day,
It's
you
that
know?
simple.
Yeah,
It's
I
that
think
simple.
so. And
Yeah.
I can just reach for it. It's see, as we talk, things will pop into my head. And that became like, that was one of the things for me was I used to write a ton of Vicodin, which is the hydrocodone, for my patients. I take your gallbladder out and I'm going to write it for you. And a part of me, because my mind wasn't totally clear, would think like, hey, I'm writing this for all these people, 50 times, 40 times a day. I could take some of these. I'll be all right. So there's
Mm.
that, that thing. And I've heard anesthesiologists tell me that, I'm pushing fentanyl all day. I'm push, and I just kind of said to myself, yeah, what does it feel like? What's it? And
Yeah.
then, all hell's breaking loose.
Some for you, a little for me. Some for
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
no. But do you find that community, that population specifically, are they less likely to get the help they need even when they know they need it?
Yes, definitely. So I think also with healthcare professionals, there's a ton of denial. Like it's really strong and really heavy. And it's around what I described, like my career is going to be over. There's a
Mm.
lack of understanding that actually, no, the further you go or the more underground you go, the worse your outcome's going to be, whether it's from the medical boards or from the legal system or whatever it may be. That's the biggest fear. And so like when I talk to these med students and talk to these, residency programs and talk to these hospitals, it's actually, it's the opposite, right? So if you go and ask for help, which again, like you and I talked about, is very difficult for physicians who say, or nurses or nurse practitioners or whatever, who are said like, here, there's a job to do, just do it. Don't bitch or moan. So it's hard for them to understand that actually asking for help, just like many of the paradoxes of 12-step recovery, like to win, you have to surrender. But in that, you have to ask for help. And so we try to get that across to people, because when you do ask for help, it not only slows down the disease and puts an end to it there, but it allows people to get better. And that's a big, big burdensome thing. The other thing is that, unfortunately, there are some states that you have to be really careful. Like we dissuaded some, healthcare professionals from going back to certain states. I hate to say it, because you knew that they were going to have a harder road.
Yeah. So Brene Brown, familiar
Yeah.
with that name?
Yeah.
Yep.
Super stuff.
Yeah, I had a guest that turned me on to one of her quotes that will not leave my head, which
Uh,
is, "For shame to grow, if you put shame in a petri dish, what three things would make shame grow?" And two of them are fear and silence.
yeah.
And in this context, if I'm a physician and I know I have an issue, the fear of my career being ruined would make me be silent, and I would just kind of internalize it and hold on to it, and it would probably I'd get sicker and sicker. I can see
Yeah,
how that could happen. Yeah.
that's a great quote. And that's it. The
Yeah.
isolation and fear. Fear is it,
Yeah.
though.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
don't
that
know
was
the
for
third. I
me.
don't know the third one. I was going to Google it in the background here.
Yeah, I
Like,
was
what's the
like,
third
uh-oh.
ingredient?
And just now you're going to make me look it up. Yeah.
You should look it up.
And I will, but even for me at the beginning, like that was right. My reaction was fear.
Yeah.
Like my career is going to be done. No,
Yeah.
it wasn't. But that's what I thought, until I figured this thing out.
Yeah. Let's dive into medication
Yep,
assisted treatment. Did I say that right? Medication assisted treatment. Yes.
you did.
So let's focus specifically in the context of alcohol use disorder. So can you explain what, in that acronym, we're going to start using it. Do you say MAT or MAT?
Yeah, MAT. But some
MAT?
people do. But some do say Matt. So you're
All right.
okay. You're all
Let's
right
give
with
Matt.
you.
Let's give Matt a try. What is Matt exactly? Explain what it is, how it functions, and let's look at it through the lens of alcohol use disorder. But maybe we kind of venture off broader. We'll see where we go.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that where I come from, right? So this is funny because there's like two different camps. So Matt, whatever you want to say, medication assisted treatment.
Mm-hmm.
The little words that we always say, or I would say, is it's not medication as treatment. So just like I talked to you about those PHP programs having, 5 or 6 different things that help people get better, it's the same with medication. So it's medication assisted treatment. So you still need the 12-step recovery. You still need the psychologist, the psychiatrist, the support, you still need all of that, but medications will help. So where we see them help the most is number one, early on when I talked about that midbrain being like so loud, and the midbrain is like the reptilian brain, like the fight or flight or the, procreation or the eat and drink to stay alive. That's what's controlling our mind. So our frontal cortex, which is like the stop sign, which is who we are, which is like, if I get another DUI, you're going to go to jail for a year, where someone whose midbrain's not talking, it's their frontal cortex is like, okay, I'm going to stop drinking. The alcoholic is like, well, I'm going to get fed 3 times a day, right? Like thinking that, like already knowing they're going to get another DUI. So the medication, a lot of times early on, we use it to quiet that midbrain while the therapy, while the, intense treatment, while the 12 steps or, 12-step recovery is going on, so that we can change things. And the brain's very plastic, right? So it's going to go back and change while we can then let the frontal cortex kind of take over. So that's one of the big things. The other big reason for medication assisted treatment is for cravings. Like if my mind is going and I'm thinking about alcohol or thinking about opiates or thinking about whatever, and I can kind of quiet that down and allow myself to do the work that I need, then that's it. So the big fear that we have is that and when I say there's 2 camps, the other camp is like, just heard someone's talk and I didn't say anything. I just kind of let it go. But someone said that if they could just get that patient on Sublocade, someone who has an opioid use disorder, which is a buprenorphine product, they'll be okay. Like there's this magic shot, and it's just not that simple. So those that think it's medication as treatment, if there was a pill or a shot that I could give you and it would cure your alcoholism or your addiction, that would be great. I mean, I'd be out of a job, but I go back to operating. I don't care. But that's just not true. There's not a medication. It's everything together. So, look, not to get super political, but ASAM, the American Society of Addiction Medicine, that's kind of like a thing going on. Like there are thoughts that there is just medication that will take care of all this. Whereas we know that there's a psychological, there's a spiritual, there's a physical, and there's a mental manifestation of this disease that all needs to be worked on at the same time. That's the bottom line.
I love it, man. The subtle difference between as treatment and assisted treatment, but it's a subtle difference, but it's a powerful difference because I think it perfectly articulates what you think is the right recipe to help someone get better, which is use the medication as an assistance, but also let's address and let's use all the other levers that we know are powerful.
That's right. You have to you got to work on everything else.
Yeah.
100%.
So let's get to that lizard brain or the middle brain. All right. So we'll kind of pull back over specifically to alcohol. What medications in particular help to settle down or silence that middle brain so you can work on the other areas of your brain?
Yeah, I think that there certainly are probably 5 or 6 people could argue, but the big one that I love and that we use a ton of is naltrexone.
Mm.
And naltrexone is, there's these little cups on our brain, and it does partially bind the mu, which is actually the opioid receptor, but it partially binds that. And the goal with alcohol is, it was first FDA approved for alcohol cravings. And then, it was known that it blocks the effects of opiates. So it was like, a win-win because of our opiate problem that we've had over the last, 15 or 20 years. So the naltrexone is the big one. It's given typically as a tablet. The dose is 50 milligrams. You can start at a lower dose. Certainly people that have maybe some of the side effects, you can even get it compounded at a lower dose. It's given once a day. You can either give it in the morning or at night. And then there's an injectable form of it, which is called Vivitrol, and that's given once a month. And, where we use that is typically with people that maybe we have some compliance issues, right? So, people that subconsciously or consciously don't take the medicine, hey, you're getting the shot every 28 days, certainly with opiate patients, but alcohol too. And the Vivitrol is like kind of a more steady delivery of it. So naltrexone's the big one. Naltrexone's also really good for like some of the co-occurring disorders. So where we may see that is with, look, gambling is going to be a big thing. You've probably had gambling on your podcast, but huge problem. So it might help with that, might help with some sexual compulsivities.
Pornography.
Huge. We use it for that. Will I use it for a cannabis or a cocaine? Yeah. Can I prove that it's going to help? No, I can't. But the goal of naltrexone won't block, just so you know, it won't block the total effects of alcohol. It should really lower some of that euphoria or that buzz that you feel at the beginning, but people still can get drunk, if that makes sense. Like the goal low is to lower that and to change it. And I'm hoping that if someone's in a recovery program, they've gone through, detox and treatment, and they're on naltrexone, they may try to drink on that or drink on and then say like, it's just not worth it. And maybe that's enough to flip it. But I want to quiet that midbrain and those cravings so that we can work on the frontal cortex with the therapy and the psychological, psychosocial, the spiritual, all those other manifestations. So that's the big one.
Can I ask a quick question? I'm sorry to interrupt you. I've always had a hard time, perhaps it's the limitations of my own IQ, but I've always had a hard time understanding one aspect. So, because I've read about naltrexone, and I understand that it is a opioid antagonist. Am I right so far?
Yep.
But when I start to try to visualize what's happening in the brain and how it works, that's where everything kind of falls apart for me. And I'll try not to drag us too far in the weeds, but correct me if I'm wrong or when I'm wrong, and I'll talk and take breaks as I talk. But I drink alcohol normally. Endorphins, neurotransmitters released, and they need to be received in a receptor to fully experience the effect of the neurotransmitter. Am I right so far?
Right. Correct.
Okay. Naltrexone, ingested orally or injected, will block that receptor. Whatever that looks like is irrelevant, but it'll stop or mainly stop that neurotransmitter from being received so that I experience the euphoria or the psychological or emotional impact of the substance. Right so far?
Correct.
Okay. And you said that it can also do the same thing for opioids, potentially?
Yes.
I'm assuming like cocaine, which is more of amphetamine, I think. But also gambling and, sexual compulsion. So here's a question, because I'm glad I got to the end.
Yeah.
I'm correct so far. All right, sorry, 2 questions. So would that imply then that the same endorphins are being released when I'm ingesting, other things other than alcohol, but also consuming images and visualizations with my eyes, like watching pornography or opening up my phone and swiping and seeing that I just won a parlay on a big gambling bet?
Right.
Like, are those all like similar endorphins, and this thing is blocking all of them?
Correct. And so it's basically, like, not to super simplify, but yeah, I mean, what we worry about is the most common ones are dopamine, right? You're going to hear a lot about dopamine,
yes.
serotonin, and those rise and fall of those layers, of those levels. But yeah, that's a very similar, your question is correct. It's, are we going to be able to see and differentiate a little bit differently, specifically for alcohol versus sex versus, but in the overall grand scheme of things, it's it's basically a rise and fall in dopamine or serotonin. They're like the euphoria or the making us feel good. That's what we want.
Mm.
That's
Okay.
exactly it. So are they hitting a little bit different in the areas of the brain? A little bit. Yeah, a little bit different, but it's all deep in that in the base of the brain there. And that's why you're going to see it work similarly
Mm.
and be very positive. Yes.
Okay.
Because
Um, sorry.
it's the wow, it's the reward center, right? So you're going to hear that too. That's what's lighting up.
Yeah. Here's I'm literally just kind of like putting myself in maybe like a patient or consumer's position. But so if that is how it works, what I would be curious about, I don't know what concerned is,
Yeah,
will it also then, it being naltrexone or a medication like it, will it also then block the endorphins or the dopamine that would be released from healthier activities,
correct.
things like actual intercourse with like my spouse or
Exercise.
winning
Yeah,
a basketball game or going for a walk. And I know that I do understand that the release of that dopamine might be more subtle than say like this flood that comes from a substance.
yeah.
But could that mess up my overall experience of life to have joy in it?
So that's the question we get most commonly from people who are recommending to put them on this.
Mm,
Like, am I going to still have enjoyment when I go exercise
yeah.
or do whatever it is? And so the answer to that is that yes, you are. Is it going to be a lesser degree? The answer is yes. I think there is there going to be overall. It's just like anything that we talk about: risks, benefits, positives, negatives. And what's the overall effect, or is it worth it in the grand scheme of things? And I think the answer is yes. Is there going
Yeah,
to be
agreed.
more of a balance? Probably. And, a lot of people with substance use or alcoholism, we don't like to be balanced, which is actually really a good place to be. A lot love the highs and lows.
Yeah,
And naltrexone's going to get you in a balanced position. It's going to get you in a balanced place. So you're
good.
still going to have enjoyment for that from those things. And many things that I'm able to comment on, I've been on. I've never been on naltrexone. So I just know that when I talk to my patients, they're really pretty honest with me. I just have that
Yeah.
knack for, I feel like getting there. And most say though that there's maybe a subtle change or decrease, but when they balance it out and they think in their minds, like what's it offering me versus what I'm getting, that they're okay with it.
Yeah, I probably should love this, but I've taken it. I've taken
Okay.
naltrexone. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I found that how I felt 3 weeks in
Yeah.
taking it, having not drank alcohol at all for the first time in like years, I could not discern whether or not I wasn't
Okay.
getting as much fun from my walk because my whole life just felt infinitely better because I wasn't drinking
There it
every
is.
day. So it
There
was
it
kind
is.
of like, I
Yeah.
mean, who really cares, I guess. But
But it's a
last
great
question.
question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great question.
I kind of was wondering that too when I took it, but again, like the before and after was just so much stronger because alcohol was removed and dislodged. So, um, all right, so that's it on naltrexone. I interrupted you earlier. You were going to mention, I think, two other medications in the medication-assisted treatment category. So, what are the other ones?
Yeah, I think for alcohol, the two other big ones are the next one that we use very commonly is Campril, which is acamprosate. It's a great medication as well. Typically, it's prescribed just like naltrexone once alcohol is out of the system. It certainly, interestingly, Campril seems to help with anxiety, helps sometimes with some sleep disturbances, as well, and certainly helps with cravings for alcohol. The negative for Campril is it's 2 pills 3 times a day.
Okay.
So you and I know that like to take 1 pill once a day is tough for people. So the 2 pills 3 times a day sometimes can be hard, but we still use it. The vast majority of my patients are on naltrexone. We do use Campril in some situations, and some people love it. I've got one guy right now in treatment who he loves it. It really helps him, and it's positive. The third one is antabuse or disulfiram. So that's a negative feedback medicine. And what do I mean by that? Well, you take the antabuse, the 250 milligram or the 500, typically 250, and when you drink, you're going to get the flushing and you're going to get the nausea and the vomiting and throw up. So that's a negative feedback one that we don't necessarily, because it seems like, drastic to people or punitive. But I have had patients, I can think of one, she drank through it. So with antabuse, typically you should have, or you have to have like a loved one kind of watch you take the medicine so you know you're taking it. So like when someone's in treatment, it's obviously easy, right? You give them the medicine, mouth checks, do the whole thing.
Mhm.
But some people need that. But yeah, like this one woman, would take the medicine in the morning and start drinking once her husband went to work, and throw up for the first 2 or 3 hours and then drink more and get the euphoria. And
Oh,
then by the time husband came
bless her.
home, yeah,
Mm.
and the point of that story is that no matter what we put people on, so again, not medication as treatment, it's
Yeah.
medication assisted treatment. No matter what we put people on, there's no 100% fail safe that's going to keep people from drinking.
Okay. It feels to me anecdotally or subjectively that there's momentum around medication assisted treatment is picking up,
Yeah.
specifically around alcohol use disorder. What's your sense of why that's happening, assuming you agree? And then kind of looking forward and kind of forecasting out, how do you see medication assisted treatment evolving and changing over the next, say, 5, 10 years? Or maybe even what are you hopeful to see?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a push, and I think that there has been an increase with us using it for alcohol use disorder. With I'm a little skewed because with the healthcare professionals that I took care of for so long, we've used it pretty much from the beginning, and so I knew that it worked in that patient population, so we used it more. So I think that as we go through this, more and more people are on naltrexone because it certainly is helping with the cravings and helping with the alcohol. With regards to the future, that's a wonderful question. And that's why it's like such an exciting time in addiction medicine the last few years and the next 10 years. And it's the genetic part of it, right? Like as we're discovering different genes and discovering, who's got a predisposition to this or doesn't, I think that that's where a lot of the work and a lot of the focus is going to come is more on prevention. How much
Mm.
will medications play a part in that? I don't know. I think that what would I want or what would I expect? I would love to know who's more at risk for this. Can that prevent someone from becoming an alcoholic or becoming an opiate addict? No, of course not. And would there ever be a medication that would seem to help or prevent that? That would be great, but there has to be that balance of decreasing cravings, decreasing the chance that I'm going to drink with still maintaining my life in a good way. And that's why I think that naltrexone, an oldie but a goodie, is really doing the job. Are there going to be offshoots of that probably or more developments as we go along? I would assume so. I'm guarantee because it's just the pure percentages, right? So 10 to 12%, 15% of people, around the world have problems with these substances. That's a huge number of people.
It's a huge
So
number, huge
yeah.
opportunity. Yeah. Um, we have an election coming up.
Yes.
Don't worry. I'm not going to talk too much about that. Um, that said, it
Yeah.
forces us all to evaluate candidates. And one of the early candidates that I was very just interested and curious about was RFK
Yeah.
Jr.
Yeah.
And when I dug into his policies on his website, I was absolutely elated to see his focus on mental health, specifically mental health reimbursement. He seems to have latched on to this unfortunate reality that health insurances make it incredibly difficult for people to get reimbursed for mental health services, especially the clinicians who are frontline providing that care. So
Yep.
much so that clinicians will intentionally be out of pocket or out of network, which has patients be out of pocket, which can be a deterrent for patients to get the help that they need. And all that to say, not that you asked me my answer to the
Right.
question of what am I most hopeful about. What I'm most hopeful about is people like him and other people with large platforms. I would say fixing that major problem that, a physical ailment it should be treated, or should I say, a mental health illness should be treated just as seriously and with just as much compassion as a physical ailment. And I don't think that that's the case right now. So my hope is whether it's medication assisted treatment or any of the other powerful tools that people can access for recovery, that all of that becomes much more destigmatized, much more accessible, and much more affordable for Americans. Because as you said, there are a lot of people that need help from people like you and Release Recovery and all the other people who are out there like willing to give the help. But I think we have to break down some of the barriers that make it hard to get that help that they need.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So I've got, and it's just very interesting you said that. A dear friend of mine, Adam Scioli, who I love, is he's the chief medical officer at Cairn, where I'm at Release now, but just a great friend. And he had shot me a text. He said, you got to listen to RFK on Tucker's podcast. And he said, just listen and let me know. And I didn't realize, I'm not disclosing anything, that he was in, there's recovery there amongst the two of them. And so I think that's part of this, right?
Yeah, he's sober. He identifies
sober.
as in recovery.
There you go. Yeah, it talks about going to an AA meeting, and it like blew me away. I was like, oh my God, this is so great. I didn't know that, right? So I thought that was really powerful. So he has that personal experience and that understanding. Your question is a great one. So there runs into that. So I just had a little experience with like I took one of my kids, my youngest, to the pediatrician, and I saw that they did like a mental health screening. And then I saw in the bill that they were able actually to bill for it and get paid for it. So I was like really pumped for them, because that's it. Because for a period of time, you weren't going to get any money. So it was like, why ask the questions and spend the time when I've got to see people every 5 or 6 or 8 minutes or whatever it is. So I think that's the way to go. I agree with you 100%. I'm so glad that he's going to advocate for this and he's going to push this. He's a big mental health guy. And it's not just substances. It's depression and anxiety. And look, the world's different. I mean,
food is medicine.
Huge.
Yeah.
Oh my God. All that stuff goes on.
Hey, real quick, but that scenario is a perfect way to kind of make this point. But okay, so you went to a pediatrician screened for mental health. You saw it as a, now here's the challenge. When your health insurance carrier gets that bill, do they send you an out-of-pocket bill in 3 weeks because they've decided that they're not going to reimburse for it? I think that's where the rubber meets the road of where the legislation needs to change. Someone needs to hold them accountable to say, yes, that is a code that you need to reimburse 100% of the time.
Yeah, that's it, because we did get billed for that. Yes, you're right.
Sorry to curse, but that's the problem.
And
we just landed on it. Yeah.
I'm in the business. And
I used to be in the business. We used to provide care for patients, and then they would get a bill, and then they would contact our group, and rightfully so, because they didn't know.
Correct.
And it's just, that's where I think we got to do some heavy lifting.
And there has to be work there. You're 100% right. And there has to be reimbursement, and there has to be help, and because this can't be, look, there's a lot of wealthy families that are able to pay for this care and not affect them. But what about middle class, and what about lower, income and everything? Yeah, everyone's the same. So it's like, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. Amen. Hey, look, thanks for letting me drag you down in the weeds multiple times in this conversation.
Oh, man, it's been great.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for joining me, Dr. McCormick.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse, so much for having me. Really, this is actually a great morning. I really appreciate it.
All right, awesome. Dr. McCormick, everybody, live deep. All right, everybody, that's the show, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Sober Strength podcast and spending some time with us today. We've got a favor to ask. If you enjoyed the show, would you please consider subscribing to the show and even leaving a rating and review? That simple act drastically helps us reach more people in our mission to help them live better, longer, healthier lives. You can also follow us, if you'd like, on Instagram and YouTube for regular tips and motivation around mental health, addiction, and so much more. Know that your support fuels our brand and is greatly appreciated. So until next time, stay strong and live deep.